Welcome back, 7th grade. Chapter 7, Launching a Nation. Section 1, Washington leads a nation. So let's talk about our very first president of the United States, George Washington, who was selected unanimously by the Electoral College, which, if you remember, is a body of electors who represent people's vote in choosing the president. So they chose Washington unanimously, and they selected John Adams to be his vice president. John Adams being one of the founding fathers of our country. He was a lawyer. He was the one who defended the British soldiers who fired into the crowd at the Boston Massacre. You know, being the first president of the United States means that a lot of the things that you do are going to be a first. And that's the same for the First Lady of the United States, who in this case was Martha Washington. And she did a lot of entertaining at social events. Now, some people believe that that's probably what the First Lady should do. But yet there are some people who believe that women should play a greater role in the new nation. Still others thought that they should play the role of teaching their children to be good citizens. So it didn't really matter what Martha Washington did. She was probably going to have a critic regardless. Some hoped that more women would receive an education because during this time period, of course, few families provided much education to the females or the daughters of the family. Most women in the early republic managed their households and worked hard inside or outside the home to support their families. So Washington's the first president, and one of his first tasks will be to organize this new government. And when I say the new government would set precedents, it's really George Washington and the rest of the government, I suppose, who are setting these precedents. A precedent, and let's not get that confused with president as in George Washington, but a precedent is an example for future actions, for future presidents down the line to follow. Congress will create executive departments, and Washington will create the president's cabinet that served as his advisors. And he really had four guys in his first cabinet. You have Alexander Hamilton, who is the first Secretary of the Treasury. And you have Thomas Jefferson, who becomes the first Secretary of State. So if we're looking at the picture here, here's Jefferson right here. Here's Alexander Hamilton right here. There's George Washington. Two other guys in his cabinet would be Henry Knox, who, if you remember from the movie we saw about the crossing, he was kind of the overweight gentleman who liked to fire the cannons. He became the first Secretary of Defense. And there's John Adams, Vice President. And then there was a guy named Edmund Randolph, who was the first, what they call the Postmaster General. Congress will pass the Judiciary Act of 1789 that set up the federal court system. The act, meaning the Judiciary Act, created 3 levels of federal courts. So if you remember, what are the 3 levels of federal courts? Okay, what's the first one? Yes, you're right, it's the Supreme Court. What's the second one? Oh yeah, U.S. District Courts. What's the third one? All right, the U.S. Court of Appeals. Now what the Judiciary Act of 1789 did was not only created the 3 levels of courts, but it also defined their powers, meaning what they can do or can't do as a part of that court system. Now the president will be the one that nominates all the federal judges that you see in the court system. Americans' expectations for the new nation. The United States had 4 million people in 1790. Most people were farmers who wanted fair tax laws and the right to settle Western lands. So if we're looking at our nice little map here, you kind of see this darker area right here. That's where the majority of the people are, and the darker the color is where the majority of the populations were. So more northeast would be the large populations. Merchants, laborers, and craftspeople wanted help with their businesses, meaning help from the government with their businesses. The very first capital of the United States was in New York City, which was a trade center, and it was the economic hub of the nation. I mean, lots of people and trade happened through New York City. That is the end of section 1.